Lesson 1.2. You'll need to gather some supplies, specifically for soap making. These are mostly normal kitchen utensils, and these will stay separate from all of the supplies that you use in your kitchen to prepare food. Now, there are some practical safety reasons for this, which I will explain, but the most obvious reason is that these things will make everything taste like soap if you try to cook with them. And for whatever reason, there's no getting that taste out of your dishes once you've been making soap with them. Now, this is especially true for the crock pot, so don't even think about putting a pork loin in after you've been slow cooking 3 pounds of soap. You'll need to have separate appliances for cooking and soap making. One of the most practical tips that you'll ever get in the beginning tutorial stages is to know what utensils you'll be using ahead of time and have them in front of you and ready. This actually goes for all your supplies like wax paper, lids, even cold water, along with the utensils that you'll be using. The reason for this is because making soap can be a time-sensitive process, and depending on the recipe you're using, and possibly other conditions, the pace of your recipe can start to set up faster than you expect. And if you turn your back on a project to go fishing through a drawer looking for a stick blender or a spoon, your soap can turn from a pudding texture to a block of cheese in a few minutes, and you won't be able to get your ingredients mixed into your recipe. So this type of thing can happen quickly, and sometimes it's completely unexpected. And the best way to control your recipe is to have everything that you need laid out in arm's reach before you start mixing your oils. So if the recipe starts to move faster than you do, you've got your eyes in front of you on your project and not up in the cupboard above the refrigerator. The first thing we need to cover is that you need to wear safety protection clothing. There's no soap making without safety glasses, gloves, and even a mask. We'll discuss chemical burns in a few videos, but for now, you need to collect basic safety protection glasses, and you need to wear kitchen gloves. These can be your heavy-duty ones, but the thin silicone gloves work just fine. You'll want to wear long sleeves, and you need to have your legs and feet covered with clothes to protect you from any splashing or spills. You'll be pouring and setting up your soap into silicone molds. Now, you can use baking molds, or you can use specialty craft molds specifically for soap making, and you'll find that there are a variety of sizes in specialty loaf-shaped soap molds. Most of the recipes written in my collection are measured to a 3-pound loaf, and you'll discover that it's really easy to find these 3-pound loaf molds just about anywhere. Now, I like to use this shape that allows me to cut my bars into these square shapes. And just a tip before you start getting into the modules where we practice different recipes, this is not the most practical size if you're thinking about selling, because this isn't the standard size for a box when you start branding and packaging. Now, if you go to step up your product line and you want to package with boxes, and you don't have to use boxes, that's just one of a few ways to package. The easiest way to buy boxes for beginners is to cut bars to be about 2.5 inches wide. Now, these that you see here are 3 1/4, but this is what I make because this is just how I like my project. Now, your molds can come from Walmart or the internet. Just about any silicone mold will work. And if you do want a bar that's shaped like most of the ones that you see in the store, you'll want to cut them to be about 2.5 inches, and you'll want to keep your eye out for a mold that looks tall and skinny compared to these fat ones that I have here. Now, at the bottom of this page, I'll have some links for places online where you can buy some of these molds. Now, I just want to mention that none of the links or suggestions that I make inside this course are ever affiliate links. I'm not sponsored or promoted by any of these companies. These are just places that I've bought from, and I know where you can get these supplies. Now, there's a more comprehensive list of supplies in the resources section in Module 10. So if you're a member and you're not located in America but you're sitting in another country, I do put links that I find when I come across them for you guys who are overseas over in that section in Module 10. But when you find a link to a supplier at the bottom of any page in this entire course, that's because I've bought from that company before and I own the product that I'm suggesting. I'm not being paid to sell their items. Now, there are also plenty of slab molds out there, and these can get pretty pricey. You'll find plenty of recipes written in the directory that utilize slab molds also, and they're usually written in 5 or 10 pound recipes. Now, you can buy beautiful wooden slab molds, or you can wrap a cardboard box in crafter's tape. Now, some of you guys who've been watching my videos for a few years will recognize these box slab molds from going back from even as much as 5 years ago. These are the exact same ones. They cost me no more than $5 to make. The boxes were free, the tape came from the dollar store, a few rolls will cover a whole box, and like I said, I've had these for years. I've used them over and over again, and they still work the same when they did the very first time I made them. Now occasionally you might want to add another layer of tape, and all you need to do is line these in wax paper and pour your soap recipe. Now here's another little tip. Recently, I've been lining these in saran wrap along with wax paper. You can do it both together or one or the other, and it all works just fine. Now plastic can be a little bit fussy, and you'll probably end up having to plane the soap from some of the wrinkles that it can cause if you don't get the plastic to lie perfectly straight. But it also protects the box better than the wax paper. Now you can even put a layer of plastic wrap down and then a layer of wax paper to keep the bottom flat. Any way you do it, you've got a mold that works for pennies compared to some of that expensive pricey stuff. Now another option is to get these plastic slabs from your kitchen supply store. Now you can make as much as a 50 bar batch, and this one that I'm showing you here is a fairly small slab, but you can get these huge, up to 50 pounds. And the cost of these is around $12 to $25. So these are some slab mold options that won't break you. Of course, if you want, you can get the heavy-duty wooden slab molds, and you can find those at your soap supply store. But you're comparing those to anywhere from $80 to $125 compared to these options here. You do need a kitchen scale. It needs to be digital. It needs to be accurate. You want to make sure that it allows you to switch between ounces, pounds, and grams. Most of your standard scales will allow for that without even having to look twice at them, but if you go and get a cheapy one, you might end up being surprised. You'll find soap recipes written in all of the increments that I just mentioned, so you do want to make sure that you can switch over to those if you need to use them. Just make sure that you periodically put fresh batteries in. The scale will tend to get lazy when the batteries drain, and your reading might end up being a bit jumpy. So this can go unnoticed in a digital scale, and you might end up wondering why your recipe seems a bit off sometimes. Make sure you keep the batteries fresh. You'll need a basic kitchen thermometer. One of the subtleties in soap making that creates a successful recipe is blending the ingredients at similar temperatures. Until you've done the same recipe a few times and then you get to know it, you'll want to monitor and control the temperature when you're combining your oils with your lye. You'll need a box full of bowls, containers, and stirring utensils. Plastic is the way to go for kitchen crafts. They're easy to get at the dollar store, they won't shred into splinters or have a chemical reaction with your recipe, they're cheap, you won't feel guilty when you throw them away, and you can replace them easily. Just remember that lye eats things, and so you can expect them to wear away faster than your normal utensils. You must be aware of the types of metals that you're using. If your bowls and mixing items are metal, they must be stainless steel and not aluminum. Check any metal and keep any aluminum as far away from your soaping factory as possible. Aluminum and lye create a nasty chemical reaction, and your mixture may react violently. It can steam, froth, hiss. It can turn orange, brown, and even green. If this happens, the batch is ruined, the fumes and chemicals are toxic, and you have to throw this out immediately. You'll need a crock pot when you begin with Lesson 3, Hot Process Soap Making. Now, crock pots aren't cheap, but take a moment to browse the shelves of your local Goodwill or local thrift stores. I've got a collection of 6, and I've never paid more than $12 for a large crock pot. Remember, we're not cooking food in these, so if you should see one on the shelf, don't hesitate to snap them up at an old secondhand shop. The stick blender in this hobby is your best friend. Now you really need this one above all the other small appliances. Some people will tell you it's not necessary, but when you need to control the pace of your work, you're going to start to see that it really is. Now, you'll find these in a price range. The cheaper ones work just fine. You can get your project done with those, but the motor burns out sooner. So if you stick to a stick blender that's somewhere in the price range of $30 or more, it will last much longer for you and you'll be happier with that. Once we move into Chapter 6, you'll begin piping frosting textures on more creative projects. You'll want some piping tips and bags to work through these recipes. And finally, a range of small plastic tubs and cups are really helpful. Disposable is fine. When you want to separate out your colors, you're going to need plenty of containers on hand. Keep your soaping supplies separate from your everyday eating utensils, especially if you intend to sell your items. Now, this even becomes more important if you start to expand your product line out to items that may need a preservative. It's best practice not to cross-contaminate cooking with soaping. Now, is it actually dangerous to cross-use utensils? Well, the short answer is no. As long as your utensils are washed thoroughly, there's no danger in grabbing a kitchen spoon to scrape a bowl and then drop it in the dishwasher. But should you eat from a utensil that has lye residue on it, you could find yourself in a whole lot of trouble. No matter how unlikely this is, it's really just not worth the risk. Now that you're ready to gather your things, we can move on to the next lesson.